one of the realities of navigating difficult situations is that sometimes we actually don't see them coming. And it's amazing to me over the last 20 years of ministry how often this is the case. You can't prepare. This is where that ministry cliche comes from, where it says, boy, I wish I would have learned about that in Bible college. And the reality is we can't prepare you for the exact nature of each crisis that might pop up or the exact scenario that might pop up. But like the conversations we've been having here, I want to frame up some components of wisdom and discernment that may build a framework out of which you can respond in a healthy way. So in this particular conversation, when it comes to navigating a crisis, you need to understand the dynamics that you will not see this coming. This will be something inside the church or something outside the greater community or world that you don't see coming. And yet, as someone who is a faithful believer in Christ, the way you respond will actually be indicative of the nature of your faith. So here's some principles that I would want to encourage you to consider framing up in your own mindset as you think back on previous ministry crises or life situations, as well as forward. So if we were to kind of just generically put the word situation here and go, okay, there is a situation that happens. We have a situation. How do you respond in that particular moment? One of the things that I think is helpful, and I've watched this take place in healthy leaders and in healthy environments, as well as experienced this in some of my better moments, is actually in the midst of a crisis is actually to take a moment and elevate away from that particular situation, to get some elevation. And in the midst of that elevation, this may be spatial. It may be actually to remove yourself from the location, whether that be your town, your church, your office, the argument going on, whatever the moment might be. But it is more than that. It's actually to elevate yourself, to ascend, to realize that God is sovereign. This is why the Lord's Prayer starts, Our Father who art in heaven. So actually to elevate and remind ourselves of some truths and the truth of not only who God is, but who we are in the midst of this identity. One of the prayers that can be prayed in this moment, and one of the prayers that I think is helpful for me to process is what is true and what is not true. What is true and what is not true right now? So, a situation happens and we elevate and we remind ourselves what is true. God is still sovereign. God knew this was coming. God still loves the church and is still going to lead the church to fulfill her mission. What is still true? God knows what is right and what is wrong. Who is speaking truth and who is speaking lies? What is not true? Well, what is not true is that we are not called to act in a way that's not in alignment with Christ. What is not true? Well, we're not called to live in a way or respond in a situation that lacks faith or that at some level lacks love toward the greater world around us. We're not called to be that or to do that. So this can be really helpful for us to elevate away from the situation. It also keeps us at times from merely becoming an echo chamber of response with those who are kind of in our inner ear. So whether that's, friends that are part of our world or social media or kind of our greater community, we rather are seeking out what is it that God would have us discern to do. This is part of that discernment process that we're trying to get at in this module. We want you to learn how to discern situations as they come up. So as we elevate then, this can be immediate. And it can actually be just a short, quick moment of elevation, or it can actually be a prolonged moment. For instance, random ministry scenario. I was with a missions team and I was leading the particular trip down to Guatemala. We were supposed to fly out at 3:00 p.m. At least that's what I thought. But what we found out is as we showed up, the ticket agent wasn't there. No one was there. And we actually had missed our flights that day. Our flights were supposed to be at 0300, not 3:00 p.m. And in that particular moment, I had to make just a brief moment of elevation, a crisis, small crisis, but a crisis. Had to take a brief moment of elevation to ask what's true, what's not true. For instance, what's the purpose of this trip? What's not true? Well, what's not true is that I'm not going to be the kind of person who's going to get mad or discouraged or just give up or even point fingers at people. That's not true. That's not going to happen. And it's not true that that's what's even best in this particular moment. What's not true? Well, that we can't fulfill the ultimate purpose of which we are called to do. So recognize those dynamics. What's true? What's going to cost us? What's not true? I'm going to get fired. What's true? Well, it might be really, difficult to raise $6,000 additional dollars. What's not true? It's not impossible. You kind of get the point of that paradigm. All to say, it was a mess and it was an internal crisis. All of that process probably took about 10 minutes of me stepping away with actually another leader and just processing that moment, elevating away from the team, reminding myself of who God is, who we were, what we were called to do, what was true, what was not true. Other situations come up, and you may actually, with a group of leaders, need to actually take a longer group of time. One of my favorite leaders who handles various ministry and cultural crises that come up is not immediate to respond to national news headlines, for instance, but instead he will take a week to let things play out, and then at times he will frame up an actual response toward the particular crisis or a decision, usually with a group of advisors or others who are able to chime in that particular situation. In that instance, at times he takes hits and allegations for not responding immediately. But I see this as a part of his paradigm for how he wants to lead with wisdom and discernment And sometimes it's the ability to build a pause or this moment of elevation in that allows you to have just that extra layer of discernment. Of course, again, by reminder, prayer and theological reflection is a part of what we mean here. Then at some level, then we actually need to re-enter into the situation. And at this point, like the incarnation is a helpful model. Like we actually need to come in from elevating, and we actually need to then incarnate the truth of the gospel. We need to come back in and live out Christ likeness in the midst of that situation. So if there's a crisis in our church or a crisis in our world, we elevate to remind ourselves of who we are and who God is. And then we actually, with courage and boldness, like what we see with Joshua, we go on and we're strong and courageous, not because we're strong and courageous, but because God is going with us. So we incarnate those truths, and we re-enter into the situation. This again is one of those things where we must recognize that at times this will cost us. Jesus enters our world, and it costs him his life. So this may cost us insult, it may cost us allegations, it may cost us shame, but we incarnate the actual truth of the gospel that we have, even at times when it is difficult to hear in our world. There's another paradigm that I think is important. This one is actually one that President Proctor in the last few years tried to navigate a crisis that was going on here at the college. And he said sometimes when it comes to the idea of being courageous or bold, I'm going to put a kind of C on this side of the screen, and then being foolish or afraid, courageous or foolish or afraid. There's actually a middle ground at times. And that middle ground is actually at times a middle ground of wisdom. And so that's what we're looking for, is this dynamic that says, yes, we can be faithful and foolish at the same time. You can actually be courageous and foolish, and you can be afraid and foolish. What we actually want is this middle ground of wisdom and discernment. And so that's part of what we're trying to build into your processing by elevating, reflecting, and then reinserting yourself or incarnating yourself, the truth of the gospel back into the particular situation. These situations, of course, can vary by so many different scenarios. And in the life of my own church, one of the things that I would then encourage you, kind of this last principle, is to surround yourself with godly counsel. You know that this is true, that when it comes to being able to discern, and when it comes to being able to make decisions, godly decisions, that wise counsel is a part of the process that is helpful for us. And so I would encourage you, even now, before the crisis, it's kind of a preemptive planning process before the crisis, is asking this question: who are you surrounding yourself with now who are wise advisors that once a crisis comes are able to go through that process of ascending or elevating, and again descending or incarnating the word of God, and allowing that to allow us to interface with these difficult situations and interfuse into them or interject into them the truth of the gospel in a way that shows Christ, reveals our faith, reveals the love and truth that he has for us. And then when we look back on the crisis, we're able to see that Jesus actually used that crisis to bring about his glory and his goodness and bring us to a place where we rely upon his strength. Those things are all true. And I know that you've been reflecting on those things throughout the course of this semester, all the way from week one, is that our identity is firmly established. Our strength is firmly established. The wisdom we have is firmly established. Our goal is merely to navigate through life by depending upon him through that process. But once again, this week, like other conversations we've had during the course of this module on difficult issues or difficult conversations, I would encourage you, if you're walking through a scenario right now, that you either reach out to someone who is a colleague here in this class, or that you reach out to me or whoever is facilitating this course and be able to articulate as well as navigate that particular scenario together, applying some of these principles, but making sure that it's starting to be applied to your particular context. We really want to contextualize this class. That's difficult to do in these 10 to 20 minute sound bites of video clips. So your ability to reach out and to have conversations with us hopefully will help personalize and contextualize this course for you. you.